Welcome back to Outside Views, and today, once again, we need to talk about what's going on in the UK political landscape. For years, the word Brexit was the political third rail, something the new government wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole or something. It was the elephant in the room, constantly tripping up the economy, but shrouded in a deliberate, fearful silence. But now, that silence has been broken, and not with a whisper, but with a calculated, aggressive shout. Labour has finally gone studs up, as they say, daring to pin the UK's sluggish economic performance squarely on its departure from the European Union. And honestly, it's about bloody time. This pivot, this sudden and highly charged public acknowledgement, is one of the most significant shifts in British politics since the referendum itself. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, came out swinging, stating plainly, there is no doubting that the impact of Brexit is severe and long-lasting. Severe and long-lasting. I mean, finally, a senior minister speaking the truth that so many of us have known in our bones for years. And she was quickly followed by Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who actually said he was glad that Brexit is a problem whose name we now dare speak. I find that statement to be incredibly telling. It reveals just how much political courage, or perhaps desperation, was required to even mention the issue. For too long, the national conversation has been held hostage by a false piety, a bizarre notion that to critique the consequences of Brexit was somehow to disrespect the voters of 2016. And that narrative was always a pathetic cop-out, a political shield used to avoid accountability for a catastrophic policy choice. The reality is that politicians, specifically those who championed the Leave campaign, walked away after unleashing chaos and never delivered the promised paradise. They lied on the side of that infamous bus, and they continue to lie by omission every time they refuse to acknowledge the damage. So, why the sudden change of heart from the current government, you ask? The timing, as always in politics, is everything. This public airing of the economic grievance is conveniently rolling the pitch for bad news in the upcoming November 26th budget. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the government watchdog, is reportedly expected to downgrade Britain's productivity outlook, and crucially, they are expected to explicitly state that Brexit had a larger negative impact than initially thought. When the official, non-partisan numbers come out, the government knows they can't afford to look surprised or worse, complicit in denial. It gives Reeves the perfect, undeniable cover to talk about the issue and, yes, possibly to introduce tax rises or other measures to fill the economic black hole. But there is a bigger, more strategic game at play here, and that is the rising threat of the Reform UK party and its leader Nigel Farage. By blaming the current economic malaise on Brexit's implementation and the lies on the side of that bus, Labour is trying to draw a sharp contrast. They are painting Farage and the old guard of Tory leaders as the charlatans who broke the country without a plan. And they want to contrast this with their own position, which is one of realistic fixers. They can point to the May deal they recently secured with Brussels, which will erase or at least ease some trade barriers and send off a few of the hardest edges of the earlier disastrous agreement. And I have to admit that deal, while limited, is at least a pragmatic move towards stability, simplifying checks on food and agricultural products and linking carbon markets. That is a huge step forward, and it's a move I fully support, at least in what they are able to do. And we know they're not doing all the right things that would be necessary. So that thing, at least I have to support, even if I do not support this government a lot. But by pushing this narrative, they are attempting to hammer Farage as a man who offers easy sloganeering, but has no answers to complex problems like the mechanics of returning migrants or fixing the National Health Service. It's an attempt to neutralize the populist right by claiming that the proper Brexit Farage promised was never actually achievable without total economic self-harm. And for once they are right here. Of course, this strategy is a massive political gamble, and it's not without its critics even within the Labour ranks. Some government officials worry that attacking Brexit itself risks being perceived as attacking the millions of voters who chose to leave in 2016. And one official pointed out, you can't just go around blaming Brexit because it's saying voters are wrong. And this is the tightrope they are walking. Attacking the execution of the policy and not the people who voted for it. Well, you know how frank I am, and so yes, I do attack the people who voted for it without getting proper information before voting. And we all know that a major majority of the people who voted for leaving in 2016 didn't know what they were doing. Look at the Google search results right after the referendum results. Naja. It's a delicate and still easily lost nuance in the echo chamber of partisan social media, where any statement can be stripped of context and weaponized, and that will happen. And the danger is real. Farage can and will try to flip the script, telling those disgruntled Brexit voters, you are right, it's gone badly, but that's because they, the political class, sabotaged it. Put me in charge and I will deliver the real benefits, which is complete BS, by the way. And this is why the messaging has to be incredibly tight and disciplined, focusing on bread and butter issues like jobs, the cost of living, and borders, all of which have been undeniably touched by the negative consequences of leaving the EU. And they must resist the urge to drift back into a pro-EU comfort zone that suggests relitigating 2016, which they have wisely ruled out, even saying they are happy to enact policies like the controversial value-added tax on private school fees that they could not have done inside the EU, which I still think is a mistake, but yeah. The reality, as one honest Labour MP noted, is that the economy has been amorphously messed up, and the pretense that Brexit was without impact was simply treating the public like fools, once again, I have to say. And this public acknowledgement of harm is a necessary first step towards any form of realistic national recovery and repair. And on a personal note, as someone who always viewed the referendum as an act of profound self-harm, this shift is incredibly gratifying, even if it is politically motivated. It feels like a long overdue moment of collective political honesty. The elephant in the room is finally on the operating table. And I know how weird that sounds for someone with a zoo channel. And crucially, this newfound frankness is actually playing well with Labour's own base, particularly those who have long viewed Brexit as a terrible mistake. It's being seen as something finally for them, a move that might staunch the bleeding of left-wing voters who are currently drifting towards the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats. And for those younger voters who overwhelmingly support closer ties with the rest of Europe, this is a signal that the government is listening, even if rejoining the single market is off the table. Reality takes that off the table, to be honest. And in Brussels, well, this change in tone is certainly going down better. After years of aggressive denial and posturing from the UK government, a willingness to admit that problems exist is a diplomatic gift. I mean, admitting that problems exist is the start of every good therapy, as we all know. And it makes the negotiations for Nick Thomas-Symonds, who is trying to smooth the trade of food, animals and plants products across the channel, slightly less Sisyphean. And the EU will be far more receptive to the UK seeking a closer relationship, even a technical one, if the UK government acknowledges the inherent friction created by the current arrangement. However, we must remain realistic, as think tank directors have already pointed out. Even with this newfound enthusiasm from the UK, the European Union is unlikely to get Britain too much closer without demanding significant concessions, like involving greater alignment with EU rules and, of course, a role for the European Court of Justice. The EU has its own priorities now, and the UK is no longer the center of its universe. So while Labour is ramping up the rhetoric, saying they need to implement their May deal fast and showing a sense of urgency, the EU might be skeptical about whether this will make a substantive difference to the long-term relationship. The current strategy then is not about reversing Brexit. Labour has been crystal clear that they are not rejoining the single market or the customs union or the EU as a whole. I talked about the realities here anyway, but about mitigating the self-inflicted damage. It's about building a domestic narrative that holds the architects of the chaos to account, while simultaneously building an international case for a pragmatic, less damaging relationship with their largest trading partner. And my view is that looking at the electorate in the UK and the political class, that at the moment is the only sensible path forward, however risky. The economic data is too stark to ignore. The public is increasingly aware that they were sold a pup, and the political cost of denial is finally greater than the political cost of truth. Labour is making a calculated bet that the British public is mature enough to differentiate between criticising a disastrous political outcome and condemning a past vote. I sincerely hope they are right, because finally daring to speak the name of the problem is the first and most critical step in finding a solution to the UK's ongoing, severe and long-lasting crisis. This is not a celebration of a return to the past, but the sober recognition of a painful reality. And that, my friends, is a huge move. So thank you for joining me for this outside view, and if you want to see another one, the next one is right here in the end screen.